So it's been about a month since Han Kang won the Nobel Prize in literature, and I'm still giddy about it, and I know that other people are as well. So here is the comprehensive list of Han Kang's works in English. As I've said before, this is not her entire set of works. Han Kang has a very extensive list of works that just hasn't been released in English yet. She has 11 books in total that has been published in Korean, five of which has been released in English. And that's not including her essay collections, children's books, poetry collections, because she started out as a poet. So, having said that, we'll go over five of her works, including the one that will be coming in January 2025. So, first, we have The Vegetarian, translated by Deborah Smith. It also famously won the International Booker Prize in 2016. The story starts off when a woman decides to be a vegetarian, and an intense and surreal family drama erupts from all sides, from her husband to her brother in law to her sister. The most interesting thing about The Vegetarian is that it looks at the idea of how people deal with the inexplicable. Not everything in the world is something that is within our control or is something that can be explained away logically. In the book, to the family members, the main character is irrationally vegetarian, and they all try to figure out what's happening with her. They all react to it in different ways, too. One tries to run from it, another tries to endure it, and another tries to exploit it. At the same time, it is a very effective critique at social pressures in our society because how do we deal with people who seem to go against the conventionally established norms? And the perspective that Han Kang offers is very poignant. Overall, this is a great entry point into Han Kang's works, especially if you like surrealism. Human X, also translated by Deborah Smith, it tells a story of the people whose lives become messily entangled in the horrific tragedy that was the Gwangju uprising. So, to give a bit of context around the book, in 1979, the military launched a coup led by General Chun Doo-an right after the assassination of President Park. And as a reaction, a wide popular protest movement flared up across the country. The government then initiated a nationwide martial law. One place that defied this was Gwangju, where people continued to protest in the streets. So, in order to suppress the protest, the military deployed special forces and paratroopers into Gwangju, who then proceeded to indiscriminately release violence onto the people of Gwangju. Han Kang herself is a Gwangju native, and you can feel the pain that she must have felt as she was writing this book. Due to this book, Han Kang was blacklisted by Park Geun-hye's government, something I would expect a dictator's daughter to do, hide shameful past of the military regime. But it also highlights Han Kang's courage and her steadfast belief that this book had to be out there. Like I said before, I think this should be your first Han Kang book because I think it reflects much more of who Han Kang is as a writer and a person. But I mean, The Vegetarian is also a good first book too. So it's either of the two, Human Acts or The Vegetarian, as your first Han Kang book. The White Book, also translated by Deborah Smith. This is an autobiographical novel in which a narrator contemplates and reflects on her baby sister who only lived for 2 hours after her birth. One thing about the White Book that really stood out to me was the idea of how writing gives life to what's gone, how it addresses the fragility of existence that we face. I think Han Kang has always dealt with the idea of how easily we can be broken. Human Acts is a really good example where people are trampled with no mercy, and it doesn't matter how much love you were filled by your family or how valiant and courageous you were. It's so easy to destroy it all. And through the White Book, Han Kang shows how creative acts are our way of defying our perilous state in the world. And that aspect is clearly reflected in the book by this juxtaposition of Han Kang's own fragility with that of her elder sister who lived for only 2 hours. How she could not have existed had that first child lived. Is she living this life at the expense of her sisters? And I felt this book was her way of reconciling with this. This book is also very tightly managed. Like the theme of white is carried very thoroughly through. You can see it even from all this white space that the book has because it's so poetic. And it's also why I love this book so much because it's so complete, it's so full in such little words. It's like a testament to how powerful and meaningful words can be. Overall, I think this is a kind of book that you have to read over and over again to really understand its meanings. But once you do, it's very satisfying. It's like a unique glimpse at Han Kang's mind. Greek Lessons, translated by Deborah Smith and Emily Ye Won, and it's also the last book of Han Kang that Deborah Smith translated. It follows a woman who has lost her ability to speak, taking Greek language lessons, and there's also her language teacher who is gradually losing his sight. And the two are slowly brought together, united by their respective pains, as well as their private struggles around language. And it's essentially about how language forms a foundation to human nature. It throws these powerful questions on what it means to communicate with others, how the way we talk, the way we write forms these bonds of intimacy and connection. This is a very dense book. Like it's less than 200 pages, but it took me a week to try to finish because every sentence is so packed with meaning and potential for interpretation that you can't help but just read slowly. Because if you read this thing quickly, you'll understand pretty much nothing. This is not a book you skim. You need to slow down for this book. But once you take in everything that it's telling you, it is so wonderful. Finally, We Do Not Part, which will come out on January 21st, 2025, translated by Emily Ye Won and Paige Morris. This is a devastating novel about the Jeju uprising of 1948. And I really rail against that word uprising because most of it was indiscriminate slaughter. So, like Human Acts, to give some historical context, April 1948, in response to an armed uprising by the Workers' Party of South Korea in Jeju, South Korean police and paramilitary groups descended on the island and carried out unimaginable violence on the people who were largely innocent and had nothing to do with the rebellion. And as a result, tens of thousands perished. It is estimated that 1 in every 8 people on Jeju lost their life. It is by far one of the darkest pages of modern Korea's history. And like in Human Acts, once again, Han Kang brings together characters who carry the trauma of this horror and highlights their courage in remembrance and endurance. This book is already out in French, and earlier this year it won the Prix Médicis as well as the Emile Prize. I've read this book in Korean, and you have to get this book. I believe this book is a must if you're going to read Han Kang, and it comes out in English on January 21st, 2025. So these are the 5 books from Han Kang that are now published in English or will be published in English soon. And honestly, I think you should read all of them. Read all of them. They are all fantastic in their own unique ways. And as always, thank you for watching.